Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And this week has been pretty full of things that should impact the market. First of all, we of course have the Black Friday sales that are going on, and I think it was like a 15% decrease in the price on plex. And something that I hadn't seen before, I had never really noticed these lights down here, it's pretty cool. So 15% sale on plex, but also for a limited amount of time the ability to trade them without being taxed for those trades. That should really increase momentum and the volumes, so we'll definitely take a close look at that. We should also see some sales in the New Eden store, of course. In fact, I saw a tweet that said that quite a few skins were going to be on sale, so we'll take a look at that as well. But then of course the big news that dropped last week is that CCP showed us the Hypernet Relay, their plans for basically a raffle system in EVE Online, where the issuer of the raffle has to pay real life money to CCP, but where the customers basically gamble on getting something for cheap by only buying limited amounts of tickets on any of these raffles. So I'm not going to reiterate the whole video there. I'm pretty neutral about the system when it comes to gambling systems in games. This is probably like the least egregious way that you can do it. So yeah, let it come to the game and I will evaluate it as it goes along. If there's anything that CCP has to do to protect problem gamblers in the game, it would basically just be put a maximum on how many plex you can just buy straight from them in any given amount of time, because really that's the only angle so far that I have seen that potentially can be harmful to someone with a gambling addiction. So as always, we'll get started here with the New Eden store, and we can see like almost a full front page of sales. Blackfire skins, those are pretty damn nice. 38 plex. That's actually pretty cheap, something to consider, especially if you want to fly Triglavian ships like myself. In Rust We Trust, you can see on sale Lava Core. That's like half price. Too bad that the percentages aren't shown. That would actually be some nice extra information. But yeah, if you want that Avatar Lava Core Imperial skin, which looks pretty damn amazing, same with the Aeon in my opinion. Yeah, for the Amar ships, this is an amazing skin that is at half price, if I see this correctly. Let's see if there's anything else. No, so that's what's on sale right now. Okay, definitely some very awesome looking skins that are on sale here as well for the Triglavians and Amar. In Rust We Trust, well, if you like oh man, Confessor Lava Core skin, very nice as well. If you like, of course, the Minmatar theme of them being rust buckets, then this could just be right up your alley as well. Let's move on to the market though. That's why everyone is here, and I'm sure you are awaiting plex and stuff. So that is getting started at 3:15. Like that, and let's take a look at that plex chart. We can clearly see the volume spike more than twice the regular amounts. This is 2,600 orders, 1.4 million units. Yeah, 3 million units for almost 4,000 orders. That is pretty damn huge, and the downward pressure is quite obvious. So this is another CCP sale chart, although what is quite noticeable is that this doesn't drop off a cliff. That is what it usually does. So this is probably because we're already on a downward trend, so the market is hesitating to go very low very quickly. We are touching 3.25 million. Let's take a look at Jita. 3.35 million for the sellers, 3.2 million for the buyers, and in the trade hubs we go down to a bit above 3.3 million. So it's now all of a sudden a very narrow margin between the sellers and the buyers of plex in Jita and in the player-owned trade hubs, and that makes a lot of sense, of course, if you take out the tax angle as well. So this is just getting traded massively across systems in Jita, not in Jita. All of that is now probably seeing lots and lots of trades, people taking their positions. And to be honest, if I didn't have 7,500 plex already, I think right now would be the time that I would risk my investment. Not only is this like a seasonal time where the winter could bring hype, could bring war. We've got chapter 2 coming. We've got a tweet from CCP indicating that something is going to happen this weekend as well. I have absolutely no idea what it is, but with a little bit of hype building towards FanFest, I think this could be the best time to jump in on the plex market. And then of course the Hypernet Relay, which is coming next month already. It is basically in my opinion, I mean, this is something that of course we can't know for sure, but if it sees usage, then that means people will have to pay real life money for those new hypercores, and that should decrease supply of plex, because I don't think you're gonna spend extra on this. I think that in a lot of the cases this will just diminish, or they'll keep their EVE Online spending at the same level. And so I think that the Hypernet Relay potentially is an upwards pressure on the plex price as well. And so right now with this sale, with this bottom, we're getting close to 3.2 million ISK. If you want to jump in, always keep in mind, I don't know the market is gambling as well. Let's keep that in mind. And so don't go too crazy with this, but I see this as an opportunity to jump in on some cheap plex with potentially some medium to longer term returns that can be pretty awesome. We can see here on this chart 3.2 to 4.5 million. That would be a pretty damn good return. Next up, the multiple pilot train certificates. These are also under pressure to less than 1.4 billion ISK and are jumping back up a little bit at the tail end. So maybe also some sort of sale or something happening that I missed, but we are back up to 1.45 billion. Buyers, well, you can see it's not that many of them, 1.33 billion. And in the player-owned trade hubs, very close to that price here again, above 1.4 billion for the sellers of the multiple pilot training certificates. Slight volume bump here, but perhaps like a small sale or something like that did happen in like a very specific reseller or something. I'm not exactly sure, but yeah, this is going to normalize, and the real question is, will we from this point on, if plex starts to go up, then I think that from this point on we could really start to rise, go back through the 1.5 billion, and then you can see the top here at 2 billion. Well, if you can get in for less than 1.5 and potentially you see a top at 2, I think that that is again not a bad place to be in. Next up, we've got the skill extractors. Very same pressure, super normal of course, because these basically have a one-on-one plex exchange built within them. Less than 400 million by quite a bit, 387 million for the sellers, 375 in the player-owned trade hubs, and 358 for the buyers. So you're buying these for less than 360 at the moment. Volumes up, but not as pronounced as with the plex. Of course, you don't have the tax difference either here. But this again, if you look at this chart, to me looks like potentially another good point to jump in. And then of course the real question is the impact on the skill injector market. We have daily login rewards again that will yield us potentially quite a few skill points. I think I'm up to 400k from this the last 3 days or so. So let's take a look at that. Large skill injectors, all right, basically flat and hesitating on which direction to take. I think that this is just two forces. There is of course one force that is going to put downward pressure on this. That is what's happening with plex, and then the force that's trying to drive it back up, I think that's investors. I don't think that's actually demand for skill point right now, but look at this chart. Potentially we know that large skill injectors can go up to 1 billion ISK. Right now we are selling them at 855 million, a bit less than that, and we're buying them for 800 million ISK. In the player owned trade hubs it's 826. There's still a healthy margin here. This market is still hesitating to choose the direction. Slight uptrend is visible, and I really think that this is investors. If you want to protect yourself from potential inflation in ISK, then large scale injectors in my opinion make a lot of sense because they have that plex component. But on top of that, if you want to gamble on basically right now, if I think about it, lots of new Triglavian stuff coming out, and we know that they have their first dreadnought, so they're bound to get the other capitals and super capitals probably eventually as well. The way the story is evolving with them, coming at the forefront, probably CSB Burger hinting at them carving out a part of space for themselves in New Eden itself. They're bound to become the fifth race. That means far more skills, new ships. Well, you can definitely gamble. Yeah, we don't like the word right now, but it is basically a reality if you're investing in a market that there is part of gambling in that as well. You can gamble on future hype and future demand for skill points, and then you of course have the perfect item in my opinion, because it protects you from ISK inflation and it gives you that potential return if the game finds success and comes out with new interesting ships and skills, then you're gonna see part of that return as well. So very interesting thing. And I think here the market, unlike plex and skill extractors, which are now again at bottom prices, not for the whole year but pretty close to that, you can see that in the large skill injectors people are a bit more careful with completely crashing the market to less than 800 million ISK. There is quite a bit more buying happening, there is more aggressive position taking happening here. For the small skill injectors we in fact have a slight move up to 170 million ISK. Yeah, 173 for the sellers, 161 for the buyers. That's in Jita. It goes down to 167 in the player owned trade hubs. And then do we see a volume increase? Yes, we do. So here in my opinion, again, people are just saying small scale injectors for less than 170, that looks like a pretty damn good deal if I look at this chart. So they're just buying everything up until that point, driving the price up. And I think this is speculators causing the or investors, you could say, causing this upwards pressure on the injector markets. For the daily alpha injectors, it is something different, of course, because your potential client base is more limited. It's only the alpha player base, and of course this is set directly by CCP, so we're actually at a 1-year low here as well, selling for 40 million ISK, buying for 35 million ISK. That is super low compared to the chart. Potential return is 70 million ISK, but keep in mind that selling daily alpha injectors is a different proposition. You can clearly see that on the volume charts as well. Volumes go up massively on sales, but during the non-sale periods it is much of a slower burn. So definitely don't go crazy on the alpha injector market in my opinion, but it is still a worthwhile investment. And right now if you're buying for 35 million and you can see a top of 70 million, you can see that the potential return shown on this chart should be around 100%, which is of course quite attractive as well. So yeah, for the plex stuff category, I would say it looks interesting if you want to invest ISK right now. Next up, we have the mineral market. That's coming in at 12:30. Let's take a look at these. You may have seen from Tritanium that we got a little bit of a bounce as well. So right now the market does not want to bring Tritanium below 5 ISK again. You can clearly see that we're bouncing off of that once the median daily price came really close to it. We're now selling Tritanium for 518 and the buyers are coming in at 503. Yeah, buyers are staying above 5 ISK as well. But the problem is that oversupply is definitely a reality. Any bump up in price, like up to 530, is getting filled with 2 billion units here, 2 billion units there, another 800 million here. So there are still massive stocks out there that want to take advantage of anything that heads towards 6 ISK, and so any increase in price is going to get knocked back down by fresh supply very quickly. But for now, Tritanium does seem to be able to defend 5 ISK as a bottom price, which is, well, it's not great, but it's definitely okay, even historically speaking. Pyrite had known a pretty nice year so far, went up from 3.5 to 5 ISK, although it is relative, of course. Pyrite is a should be more expensive than Tritanium if you look at the volumes that you usually get out of asteroids, but then of course you also have demand, how much is it used compared to Tritanium, etc. The result is that this one went down to 3.5 ISK at the bottom, almost 3 ISK, and now we're up to 5 ISK here, so that is not so bad, but 520 for the sellers and 472 for the buyers. And yeah, the slow recovery from peaks and being able to mostly defend the 5 ISK range is pretty impressive for one of the minerals that have suffered the most from all of the changes to the mineral market. I would say after Isogen suffered the most. Then we've got Mixelon that went to a 1-year low point last week, is finally bouncing back, so around 40 ISK. We're going below that for the bottoms, above that for the, well, peaks. Not sure I should call them that, but 40.5 ISK for the sellers, 39 ISK for the buyers, and right now the sellers are winning out again. Does that mean that we don't have that much supply? Well, the 50 million, 65 million, it's pretty decent last 24 hours. Well, not that many. It's a bit of a mixed picture. So there's definitely some competition in the sellers above 40 ISK, but not really a willingness to go below that. And if patience starts to win out for the sellers, we are talking 1 year low prices, of course, then they're just not gonna bother to sell to these buyers that are well below 40 ISK. And they're just gonna say, all right, I'll keep putting up my sell orders 41, 40 ISK, and just be patient for that. Force the market to not go even lower. That seems to be happening right now in the Mexelon market. Unfortunately, of course, at 40 ISK, which is, well, a lot worse than the 60 we've been able to demand for it for most of the year. When it comes to Isogen, it's well, a bad start. 16.3 ISK. This stuff used to be more expensive by a mile than Mexelon, so you can see how low Isogen has fallen, and then managed to hold on to that range for most of the year. But then after the summer, the decline we're going to new lows yet again. So the decline started there. 12.40 for the sellers, 12 ISK now for the buyers. Yep, 1 year low point for Isogen. Even worse than Pyrite. At least Pyrite has finally recovered from that 3 ISK bottom. Isogen is still trying to find a bottom, and so that is very bad news for what you can see here from time to time. Probably investors here an increased price on this volume, so probably someone that took position at 16.3 after that decline. Gonna be bad news for them. Same thing here when you get this bottom and then you see this volume here. All of this could be dumping, right, from 16, and then you can see that we're threatening to go to 15. Once we go below that, investors move in. Well, they are also in for a rough time. So it's not because you see a 1 year low point that it's automatically a good investment. You gotta keep the whole market and the whole situation in mind as well. And sometimes you can lose out. The investors that moved here because we went below 15 ISK, well, they're still losing their shirt at the moment because the bottom has not been found yet. Next up here we get Noxium, same as with Mexelon, went to 1 year low point and is still testing that. We're trying to get below 225, and in fact the sellers here, unlike with Mexelon, are croaking, they are choking, and they are going straight through 220, now starting at 219 and even 217 for 15 million units, which is almost the largest order that you've got on the books here. Buyers have gone down to 210 ISK and then very quickly go down to 205, so 200 is already coming into view as well now for Noxium. 1 year low point, and here patience is not winning out because, yeah, this guy, whoever it is, said, all right, 220, we're letting go of that. 217 it is. I want my Noxium sales, and that is really one of the market, one of the big and important factors in market is quite often, do people have the patience for it or not? Do they want liquid ISK, or are they willing to wait a little bit for a bit more of a return? So right now in Mexelon, patience seems to be on the seller side. Right now in Noxium, yeah, it's just gone and they're breaking through 220. After that, we still have our four monazite minerals. Here is Zydrine struggling in the 450 to 500 range, so definitely trading below average for the year. 481 for the sellers, 442 for the buyers, and we have an average price of, let's take a look at that, 465. It's in between them, so this is basically normal market action. Some sellers win out, some buyers win out as well, and we're in the middle of them. For Megasite, which had been struggling a lot more, and that is still struggling a lot more, we're continuing that downtrend and now heading for 300 ISK at the bottoms. 333 for the sellers, 317 for a couple of buyers, but look at that, it very quickly goes down to 288, so that margin can be opened up again very quickly. And again, a different picture, which is not something that I actually expected, just like I thought maybe Isogen and Pyrite would move in similar fashions, just like Noxium and Mexelon have been doing. Well, and you can see here patience in Mexelon markets and a bit of anxiety in the Noxium market. For Zydrine and Megasite, you've got Zydrine that's trying to hold on 450 to 500, and then you've got Megasite that is just a straight downward slide for practically the entire year from 600 and now heading towards 300 ISK. That's a loss of 50% in about a year. And here you can ask yourself that same question: should I start to invest in Megasite at 300 ISK? Is there a chance that that it will go up like Pyrite after this? Well, there is a chance, of course, especially if we do compare it what Zydrine is doing, but for now it does feel like we're still catching a falling knife that's actually been falling for like 10 months straight at this point. So yeah, it is a risky proposition, although quite often this could be the right time to move in. But then Isogen proves us wrong from time to time. So be careful, especially in the mineral market. I would be careful. For now, the trend really seems to be that CCP is okay with super cheap Tech 1 chips for the alpha clones. And we still have Morphite then. That is of course a different mineral tied to the Tech 2 economy, and that one is actually already going back up after bouncing off 10,000 disc, which is still a great price, even historically speaking, an above average price. So we're selling this now for 12,300 disc, 10,550 for the buyers. Actually an early jump. The Morphite market was really strong after the summer. September and October peaks at 13,000 and able to stay there for pretty much a month straight. Very impressive. And then the decline in the second half of the fall did not even bring us back to average prices. We're basically bouncing back off of the 10k. Morphite is very strong at the moment, despite the fact that the Tech 2 ship market is not doing that great. Next up, PI coming in at 21 minutes. Let's take a look at these. The trend last week was still quite a few struggling markets, and the refined materials were trying to recover, but definitely not doing so across the board. So for the broadcast nodes, we can see that we are trading below 2 million ISK. Yeah, less than that for the sellers. And look at the lack of buyers, less than 1.9 million for the buyers. So broadcast nodes clearly trading below average on a lack of demand. For construction blocks, you can see the October disaster that happened, down to 8,000 discs. Slow recovery, that been able to do quite okay, but now finally we can also see the 5-day moving average going back down once hitting 10,000 discs. We're talking less than that for the sellers, 9,000 discs for the buyers, and basically compared to the sellers, the buyers are just not as available. Maybe if we look at this, it's a little bit better, but honestly there's not that much competition outside of JITA. So again, a lack of demand for construction blocks is keeping us well below average. Consumer electronics, same thing. Look at this, it's not an October disaster, but a November bottom, getting close to 10,000 disc. We're trying to recover, but look at the tail end here on the 5-day moving average. It's also going back down before reaching the average ranges. 12,000 for the sellers, 11,500, but very quickly going back down to less than 11,000 for the buyers. And again, supply versus demand, there is just not enough demand right now. The coolant market is tied to fuels, and that one was doing a little bit better. You can see that we're basically landing at 12,000 disc here, around the average, maybe a touch above that. 13,000 for the sellers, 11,400 for the buyers, and that's where you gotta be careful. Look at supply, that's a decent chunk of supply. Look at demand, it is just not there. So you still have to be very careful in the PI market. For me personally, I'm not in any pressure to sell, so if stuff is still below average, I'm just keeping it, and then look for those 1-year low points to maybe make some good investments. A suggestion from you guys to replace, God, what was it? Not even sure anymore. I want to forget that PI material where the volumes just dropped off, market was gone. Here are the cryoprotectant solutions tied to the new Triglavian implants. So this one is quite a bit different, of course. Normal average price 100,000 to 130,000 disc apparently. What is this one? Yeah, 110,000 disc, and now up to 150,000 disc on the sellers. You can see that there is for the first time covering the PI market today, we've got more demand, you get more buy orders, then you've got sell orders here. So as a result, this one is doing quite strong at the 1-year high points, trading for around 150,000, about 40% more than what it normally trades at. And that is of course the Triglavians coming to the forefront. They will have an impact on the economy, and because of their newness and of course their slightly overpoweredness, that's the CCP pattern. Same thing with the structures. At first make it a little bit overpowered, then come in with the nerf bat once it's established. That tends to be the case. It does also mean very high demand, people willing to pay the premiums to be amongst the first. Enriched uranium is the exact opposite. This one is going right back down to a less than average, although it defended itself a lot better over the summer, right? Look at that August. Tied to fuels as well, so pretty good August price, but now we again see the, in all likeliness, lack of demand showing up. 13,000 discs for most sellers, one coming in at 12k, but the buyers are down to 10,400 discs. So if we take a look at that margin, 13,000 for the sellers is a bit below average, but not by too much, but it's a 10,400 disc range for the buyers, where the bottom has dropped out of to well below the entire chart. So again, showing that lack of demand. Now investors of course are willing, so you've got quite a few orders starting to compete for that 10,400 range once they see, all right, this might actually happen from time to time, but this isn't, I don't see all of these buy orders as demand in the classical way that, all right, I need that enriched uranium for whatever I want to do. No, this is investment demand that is basically gambling on this becoming a bottom price. And well, they're gambling at a pretty safe range in my opinion. The integrity response drones is continuing to struggle as well. Right now, selling for less than 2.3 million, buyers are a bit above 2.1 million. Pretty narrow margin, but that same pattern again. Supply, we can scroll. Demand, we cannot. Complete lack of demand right now. Mechanical parts trying to recover, getting back to 11,000 discs. I think the one fuel related PI material that actually struggled through the summer as well, and then just declined to a less than average price below 10,000 discs. Sellers are up above 10,000, but the buyers are still below that, and again, supply is way above demand. Organic mortar applicators still struggling to get above a million discs, just above that for the sellers. But again, buyers below, and you can see the difference. So for this week, things do seem to have normalized, especially when then we look at robotics back down to a less than average price. Basically across the board in PI, the supply demand situation has become untenable. Most of them are trading below average. There is that exception of course for the PI materials tied to the new implants, but other than that, there is just more supply than demand in the PI market right now. And that's when you can look for robotics, for instance, trading a bit above 90,000 on average, 92,000 for the sellers, but 86,000 for the buyers. So if you're able to buy this stuff for 87,500, you're already below the entire chart. This is not a super volatile range for robotics, but potentially you do have an interesting buy opportunity here for these buy prices. Self-harmonizing power cores getting pretty close to the same thing now, trading well below 2 million ISK, which is its average. Less than that for the sellers, but less than 1.9 million for the buyers. And look at the lack of demand. Yeah, this is really quite telling now that the pattern is showing up everywhere. I still have 1 hour to go, so we should be fine. Superconductors, 1 year low point all of a sudden. I produced these, so I'm not gonna buy them, but selling for 10,500 ISK, and the buyers are at 8,100 ISK. And here now we do again see a bit more demands come in, but look at the competition here. So this is not I wanna buy this and use this. No, this is I wanna buy it as cheaply as possible for an investment. And so quite a bit of position taking is starting to happen as well. Another exception here are the test cultures actually going for a 1 year high point all of a sudden. 10,000 ISK for the sellers, 8,600 ISK for the first buyer. So interesting. The one that I was most afraid of for most of the year, continuously struggling for pretty much May to August. We could have bought this for less than 6,000 ISK pretty easily, and it's now all of a sudden selling for 10k. Yeah, I completely missed it. I did not want to catch that falling knife, but surprisingly strong performance here for test cultures, and we missed out on that. Next up, we get the wetware mainframes that are trading for around 2.1. So this one is managing to come on an average price, and we can probably tell why, because despite the fact that the price ranges go up decently quickly, we have slightly more demand than in the other advanced PI materials. So wetware mainframes is able to maintain around average, but also struggling to do so. After that, let's move on to the advanced moon materials, coming in at 29.30. And let's see what we can spot here. We'll go over these decently quickly. I think overall I'm expecting pressure, and crystalline carbonite is already proving me wrong on that. Trading for around 160. 160 for the sellers, 153 for the buyers. We do see less demand than supply here again, but we're still commanding a really nice price of around 160 ISK. The others were struggling though. Ferrite carbide is back to 1 year low point, 120 less than that for the sellers, 108. Look at the lack of demand here. It's basically the choice that you gotta make. Am I gonna start to make moves on PI or on advanced smooth materials? Ferrite carbide chart, looks pretty juicy for that. Titanium carbide, same thing, right? We are definitely struggling. We can see the lack of demand. 167 for the sellers, for the buyers, and 170 for the buyers. 170 down here on the chart. Yeah, definitely a 1 year low point again. And then tungsten carbide, okay, I did not expect it to be this uniform, but there is obviously, except for some categories, a pretty sharp drop off here again. 163 for the sellers, 157 for the buyers, and we start to see that same pattern again. Pronounced 1 year low points, and then the competition comes in. Look at that, 156, and then people are definitely starting to, 0.1, 0.9, not that much, 0.5 or 0.01, excuse me, 0.09. So this is here where the trade competition is already starting to come in. So 157.5 will be the bottom range here, but investors are starting to make their move. So if you want to be part of that, well, this chart of course explains exactly why. For the metamaterials, we get the photonic metamaterials, which again sticks out like a sore thumb at this point. 18k going back above average, 18,000 for the sellers, almost 17,000 for the buyers. Really strong performance, very impressive. And then I'm expecting the others to struggle more. No, plasmonic metamaterials holding on to an above average price as well. Despite the complete lack of demand, still commanding 22,600 ISK. Is there demand? Alright, there is some demand in the trade tower for this specifically. Oh, I should probably keep this open actually. Next up, non-linear metamaterials. This one is struggling, right? Went to a bottom price, jumped up a little bit, but is already back under pressure. 22,600 for the sellers, 21,100. I mean, this still feels like it's actually an okay range, but on the 1 year chart, it's not great. And then we've got the terahertz metamaterials, which, all right, very interesting. Pretty much, if we look at tungsten carbide, if this is a predictor, then that is very interesting, of course. Super pronounced 1 year low point, went to less than 20,000. This took a little bit of time for the investors to react, but here's the volume spike, and look at the price response. We are back up to 24,000 for the sellers, 22,000 for the buyers, and so you could have grabbed these for 19,000 ISK. You already have a decently high potential Twitch trade that happened right here, which was, in my opinion though, pretty unexpected to see a recovery like this. But it does shine a different light on tungsten carbide all of a sudden, which is now also in a very pronounced 1 year low point, and investors are starting to take their positions as well. So and I think we can see here that the competition is just really starting to already drive the price back towards 160. So if you're fast on some of these low points, you can try to make some good investments, I think. Let's take a look at the other advanced smooth materials. We've got fermionic condensates flat just below average. Not much to say here. Ferrogel 1 year low point as well, quite pronounced, below 40k. Whoops, excuse me. This is what I wanted to do. Yeah, less than 40,000 for the sellers, 37,000 for the buyers. But now here you can see 0.40, 0.39, 0.37, 0.29, 0.26. You can see that investment competition, in fact all of this is 37,029. All of this is competing very hard to grab those bottom prices, which does tend to be an indication that we're pretty close on that. Honestly, if I were to have to take the jump, make a gamble on this one, I'd be a little bit aggressive and just go straight for like 37,900, do a small volume, make sure that you trigger it. I'm still below 38,000, which is still pretty damn good. That's how I would try it. That way I'm decently sure to get the buy order, and I'm also forced to stay in the low volume so I don't risk crazy amounts of risk on these, in order to, you know, have that relative certainty that my sale will trigger, because these guys competing here will then quite often say, all right, this 5,000 units at this price, or these 1,000 units at this price, just to you know, is not gonna cost me my margins, so we're just gonna dump that in and try to drive the buy price back to that 37,000 range. So that's how I tend to do it. It is also an impatient way. The most patient ones keep competing with each other. That's not really my cup of tea. I enjoy other stuff as well in EVE Online. Fuller rights managed to get above 1,000 disc and are there for now. 1,005 for the sellers, 982 for the buyers. Hypersynaptic fibers just recovering from a bottom price and staying below average. Nano transistors, alright, this one was the story of the summer, basically managing to command 6,000 ISK, 1 year high point for 3 months straight, despite the fact that quite a few of the other advanced movement materials were struggling hard. Well, it wasn't a complete lack of supply. Supply is now coming in and competing pretty hard, bring the price back to that 5,000 normal range and putting some extra pressure on now. I think basically on the downward trend here. It was becoming a small market with no supply, and so that gap has been filled and maybe overfilled a little bit. Phenolic composites still staying below average, below 2,000 discs. Ceramic fibers also struggling. You can clearly see that we went to a low point of 303 disc, back to 370 for the sellers and 340 for the buyers. So you missed the bottom, but the trade range is still pretty damn low. And so on average here, advanced materials struggling, a couple of them going to 1 year low points, but you can also see that investors are keeping a close eye on this and being pretty aggressive once the chart is beat on the downside, like here. So be careful when taking your positions. I just explained you how I try to be somewhat certain to have something that's at a low point, not necessarily the lowest point possible, but also with low enough volume, so you know you can expect a trigger that way. And well, some people won't like it, of course, because I do take away from some of their potential profits, but that's how I would start investing in the advanced movement materials. Next up, the Tech 2 ship market. 37 minutes just ticked by. So we're gonna do that, and here we also have a struggling market generally speaking. Here is the Aries, which recovered from less than 25 million, went up to 27.5, so that's not even that big of a jump, but to no avail, back down to 26.4 million for the sellers and 22.6 million for the buyers. Obviously pretty cheap at the moment. The Basilisk is doing okay after again going to 1 year low point of around 180 million, selling for 230. Buyers are forced up to 196, but this is still below 200 million for the buyers, which is still pretty damn cheap. Sellers, you know, demanding a little bit more ISK here at 230, still slightly below average though. Cerberus flat above 230, flat below average, basically 234 for the sellers, 204 for the buyers, so it's still pretty cheap buy orders. But basically I think what we'll see here is, yeah, you can see lots of competition here for the Basilisk. You can see lots of competition at an 195-700 range. So basically you are competing with all of those investors for those cheap ships at this point, which is not easy to do. I think if you do want to make an investment, you'll have to be a little bit more aggressive in your price. The Crow managing to stay slightly below average here as well. 29 million pretty much for the sellers, 26 million for the buyers. Look at the lack of demand. This is where it might get interesting, because here you don't see that pattern, although you start to see it already. At 26,024, you already have 3 of them competing. But then the question you could ask yourself is, like a 26.5 million one ship order, something that I could risk and that could trigger? It would be pretty good, I think. 26.5 is somewhere down here. Not the best just yet, so I understand the hesitation basically in the Crow market. Then we get the Guardian, which went up to above 250, is now recovering from that. 227.5 million for the sellers, but still 207 for the buyers, and actually some aggressive investment here, jumping. You can see the competition 195, 200, and then we get 205, 206, 207, going up decently quickly here, driving the average prices of the Guardian back up. Heretic still struggling, of course. Interdictor doing terribly, 55 million on the buyers. That's pretty cheap. That's all the way down here. To be honest, you guys probably should know the Interdictor story by now. It has been struggling for most of the year. Unless CCP intervenes, I don't see this change anytime soon. So you can buy one, of course. Make sure you try to grab it through a buy order, but you've had the whole year to basically grab them very close to 60 or below 60 million ISK already. So Hounds struggling to get above 25 million, although it wants to on a couple of days here. 25 million for the sellers, 21.5 million for the buyers. That is still pretty cheap. I jumped in at 22 million. Then we get the Ishtar, also a bit of a bounce and staying above average actually. 234 for the sellers, 220 for the buyers. You can see the big margin though, and then you can always also see the aggressive competition of buyers, of investors as well, because of those big margins. The Manticore is taking up, going for 30 million it seems. Yep, 33 million for the sellers, 22.3 million still for the buyers. And so this is a bit of a problem for me. I bought these at 22 million. I could try to sell them now at a 50% profit, not bad, but you need to be in right now and you'll need to be pretty aggressive, I think, because you can see that there is still lack of demand. This is not a war situation where all of a sudden people need lots of Manticores and so buyers are also forced up to 30 million or something like that. No, this is just suppliers not moving in that much, trying to dictate the price here, and this is a real fight that can be lost very quickly. Couple of sellers saying all right, 29, 27, 25, and we're right back where we started, and you may not trigger your sell order. So that's a decision to make. If you followed me on the stealth bomber investment well below 25 million, you have an opportunity in the Manticore, but it is bound to not be for very long. This is bound to not be super sustainable. You can see here that the volumes are pretty high, and I expect super fast volatility back down by next week. We'll see if I'm right. Munin, because of the nerfs, down to a 1-year low point as well. Less than 200 for the sellers, 184 for the buyers. Something that I've seen happen but haven't quite often talked about, because it is still speculation in the end, is that on nerfs there does tend to be a bit of an overreaction by the market. You can see that the volumes are completely gone, the price has gone down to 1-year low point, but is the Munin now a useless ship that should see no volumes, no trades, no interest? I don't think so, and that does mean that you can buy Munins for less than 200 million, for quite a bit less than 200 million ISK, and it could be interesting. It might find its way back into usage and back towards the 230 range as well. Or is the nerf really that bad? That is of course would mean that we'll see these low volumes persist and we'll see the range go down to 200 million. It's the gamble to take. That's again up to you to decide. Next up, we get the Nemesis, still struggling. Average price now down to 22.5 million, 22.8 for this first seller, 18 million for the buyer. Yeah, my trying to buy is still here. Nemesis 21 million. I jumped in too early. You can definitely go for less than 20 million now for a Nemesis, which is of course a pretty good opportunity. And now you can start to see the competition here as well. 17 million, look at that competition, quite a bit. Lots of people want those. 18 million, quite a bit of competition. So here again, I would do the same thing. If I'd won another Nemesis investment, I'd move with like 4 of them. That's well below 100 million as an investment. That's not that big a deal. And maybe go for 18.9 million or something like that. It's bound to be triggered, and then they can go back to competing and point oneing each other down here at the 18 million range. Next up, we've got the Oneros, also struggling, well below average. 203 for the sellers, 170 for the buyers. That is pretty damn low. all the way down here. Look at the volumes. Terrible though. Purifier slowly going up, well away from 25 million at this point. 28 for the sellers, 25 for the buyers. So this gives me hope that the Nemesis will recover as well, and that does mean that if I look at the Purifier and if I look at the Manticore, that the Nemesis is right now in a great spot to grab some really cheap ones. If you can imagine buying for 18 million and then selling at that 35 million peak, you've got a pretty amazing trade, of course, but you're dependent on a Gnostic War or something like that for that buy price to be forced up as well at this point. So the Purifier is doing okay. The Saber, all right, went up in price all of a sudden to 72, 73 million. It was on a complete lack of supply, and as expected, just a couple of ships can be brought in. Competition is super hard because of how bad the ship is. Look at that, 557 to 61, all the way back down to 62.7 million, and buyers are still right there, 58 million. When we were off to the races, the buyers were there, and yeah, 10 days later we're right back where we started. So that can happen at the moment in the market as well, and that's a little bit why I'm afraid of trying to jump in on the Manticore increase. I think we'll see the same thing by next week. Scimitar, still above 200, no, 197 for the sellers, 187 for the buyers, pretty cheap as well. And then the Stiletto, yeah, doing surprisingly well, below 30 million, but not by too much. And despite all the supply that you're seeing here, the margin is not that bad, 26 to 29 million. So Tech 2 markets clearly struggling with a lack of demand at the moment as well. But I think you get opportunities to jump in on some really good deals as well. Tech 3 next, man, my voice, maybe I should drink a little bit. A little bit of water. The Tech 3 is coming in at 46.10, like that. And as always, we'll start with the destroyers, of course. Here is the Confessor, still just holding on to that 35 million average price range. You can see though that the daily averages tend to go in a more spread way and downwards pressure. So let's take a look at what's actually happening. 35.7 million for the sellers, 32.3 million for one buyer, but then down to 32 very quickly. And in the last 24 hours, supply has dried up, but we still have a couple hundred Confessors on the market at this range. And so, yeah, too much supply, too much trying to sell here. 93, 117, 30, another 46, another 34. It's just too much for the market. So we're in a holding pattern, and well, I guess in order to not upset this too much, there are people willing to just sell straight to these buyers, because on some days you can clearly see that the average price goes down to like 33 million as well. This means that despite the fact that we don't see a lot of fresh supply, we are still in an oversupply situation. Let's see if that means that we can start to find the supply somewhere else. And with this move in the Hecate going down from 40 million then to 37.5 and then straight through that, that's where we should see quite a few more new ships. 37 million for the sellers, a bit below that, and less than 33 million for the buyers as well. And in the last 24 hours, not even. But we have that same problem. Last sell order, 76 ships in the last 24 hours. So the one sell order that does come in is of a pretty high volume. And then we still have the 15, 25, 30. So yeah, too much supply for the market. 1 year low point for the Hecate buy prices of less than 33 million. This, from that perspective, this already starts to look pretty interesting to maybe try and grab one at these buy prices, because, well, we do still see oversupply, but extra supply is starting to be limited, which is interesting, of course. Is it the Jackdaw then that's seeing new ships? Well, it's managing to maintain 35 million as an average price. 37 for the sellers, 34 for the buyers, doing a little bit better than the others. Couple coming in the last 24 hours. That's really a surprise. Where the hell are all these destroyers? And we see 50, 10. So this is starting to be primed to, yeah, at least defend its price range. Maybe even if all of this can be absorbed and there's no new supply. Let's take a quick look at the player on trade hub. No, nothing that's going to really make that big of a difference. So the jackdaw in a holding pattern, and because it's got less supply available on the market, and just the new supply is practically dead here in the destroyer market so far. Then are we seeing hundreds of vehicles coming into the market? Is that what they've been producing? No, we do have a half a page. We know there's 30 here, but this is also already starting to be a little bit more reasonable. Surprise, I thought we would still see oversupply across the board. Confessor hesitating. Heckgate still going down to 1 year low point. Looks like a really interesting one to then jump in. If we look at all of this, Jackdaw hesitating as well. And this Vapel, same thing. Bit of downward pressure, but not on hundreds of ships or anything like that. Hundreds of new ships. So overall, this is interesting. It is a little bit of a gamble, I would say, because it is very much possible that they're just trying to make this happen, but that all the Tech 3 ships are primed to squash any increase in price at this point. So be very careful with that. But then if I look at this Heckgate chart, and if I look at the ability to buy them for less than 33 million, that does look like something that I would be willing to risk at this point, because if we try to get 33 million to show up on this chart, that's all the way down here. Look at the potential. Yeah, that's quite interesting. But it is possible that this is more like a feint from the sellers, that they're just not bringing to the market because of the bad prices, but that there's lots of ships ready to squash any increase in prices, that they're basically trying to trigger that right now. Let's take a look at the cruisers next. Here is the Legion after recovering to 150. Already struggling again. 151 for the sellers, 133 for the buyers. Here we get a little bit of new supply, and this is nothing too spectacular, but still a bit more than what the market can handle apparently. Next up we've got the Loki, same thing, went up to 180, is already going back down. 172 for the sellers, 159 for the buyers on not too much supply, lost 24 hours, half a page, so that's doable. Then we have the Proteus that also recovered a bit to 150 and is right at the tail end, starting to go back down. 147, new competition coming in. It's not that much, but it's undercutting very quickly. 167, 160, 158, 158, 150, 147. So yeah, just a couple of sell orders right now is crashing the price back to a less than average price. And then the Tengu, okay, surprisingly low chart, because I put the Tengu at a much higher sell price all of a sudden. 159 for the sellers, 133 for the buyers. Really big margin, lost 24 hours, more than half a page, but the average price here is still showing something like 140 145-ish. So I think the chart has to catch up. I'm guessing a volume increase, and someone bought Tengus below 159 million. I think, and it must have just happened because the chart is not ready to catch up on that. So the Tech 3 ship market for me is in flux. Unfortunately, we've had a really good year overall with very healthy prices, 40 million and a little bit below that. Really healthy interactions between these different ship markets, but right now the oversupply has struck, and we see the first signs that it might be over, but I wouldn't bet on it. I think that this could be a feint, and that we could see oversupply rear its ugly head. I know for a fact that a couple of summers ago these ships went to less than 30 million on the buy side, and so that is something that I do keep in mind. Heckgate at less than 33 looks really interesting, and that would be the one that I might jump in on myself right now, but across the board I think that this might just be a resting place, and that supply will find its way. And I have seen lower ranges than this before, so be careful if you want to invest in these markets at this point. And then for the extra product coming in at 53.25, someone requested nanite repair paste. So nanite, let's see if we can find it. It's gonna be here, I guess. No. Oh, it's a charge, of course. Nanite repair paste, here we go. I'm not sure why this is so often requested. I do see that pop up quite regularly. I would say that people wonder what the hell is nanite repair paste doing. Well, it's definitely below average, pretty cheap at the moment. I would say 25, above 25,000 for most of the year. Currently selling for less than, for 22,000 disc, and the buyers are coming in at 20,400. Definitely struggling at a below average range right now. Couldn't tell you much about why this is the case, but yeah, it's just basically really cheap right now with a quite a pronounced leg down. Once we broke 25,000 in September, in October it was just unsustainable, and we basically moved down to 21 to 22,000 as the current range for nanite repair paste. If there are other suggestions, definitely feel free to post those in the comments. I will try to honor them, but yeah, that's easy request. Can't tell you too much about that. Maybe an investment opportunity, of course. From the looks of this chart, it looks pretty interesting, but then you are talking about an upswing from 22 to 25,000 disc. That's only 3k. I don't think honestly that the percentage is worth it. I think that there are far more interesting potentials than well, in the plex market for one, but then also in the tick to ship market, maybe even the PI market on some of the right buys. So okay, that's nanite repair paste, the extra product for this week. Interesting choice. There is this October move, but nothing that really brings too much interest to me personally. That's going to be it for this week, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.